This podcast is powered by the Mitt TV of Romeo, Michigan. If you're looking to start a podcast for your business or personal use, look no further than the Mitt TV. Their in-studio podcast experience allows you to record perfect audio and capture amazing video. That's all right here at the Mitt TV podcast studio in Romeo, Michigan. Contact them now via email for a free consultation and to schedule a studio visit at mitt.tvpodcast@gmail.com. So this morning we are here with Paul Okoniewski. Oh man, that's a tough name to say, but I've been mispronouncing it for probably 10 years. But each political year, Paul, the Mitt TV receives a lot of interest in getting to know their candidates because we're all so busy and you don't really take the time to get to know who they are, and then you get to the ballot and it's like a lot of people don't even know how many trustees there are, what the supervisor does, that there's a treasurer, that there's a clerk, unless they've somehow been connected to it by either a problem in their yard or their yard, their borders, their water bills, something. And so each year we try to focus on getting to know the candidates before everybody has to go to the polls in November for the November election. So we invited you here as one of the candidates, and we're glad you came.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So you and I have known each other for many years, and you are running for the supervisor of Bruce Township.
Township, right.
And you have run for the supervisor position before, right?
For just once, 4 years ago.
Okay, 4 years ago?
Yes.
So 4 years ago, you and I talked, and I was impressed by the involvement that you've had. You know, I remember we were sitting at a table next to one another, and I remember looking at you going, wow, you know, you've really been involved in this community for a long time. So can you kind of take us back to when you came here? I know you originated, or you were from Shelby Township. Just give us a little background on your history here and your family.
Okay, well, I grew up in Shelby Township in the 60s and 70s, and I worked at many farms there that are long gone. My most memorable one is the Ed Malberg farm at 22 in Shaner.
Oh, yeah.
Used to spend a lot of time there. And that's all gone now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and when I moved to Bruce Township, I bought my property in 82. I built my own house and moved in 86. I was 27 years old.
Okay.
And then got married 10 years later.
Okay.
And we raised 4 children together. So unfortunately, my wife passed away last year, but we still have our property. And I got involved when I was going to for my master's degree. And I worked with many of the farmers and local businesses on open space and agricultural preservation. And at that time, the board incorporated parts of my thesis into their policies and ordinances. So we...
the Bruce Township Board?
Correct. And we did a revamp of the open space ordinance. They had one, but it was very weak. Mm-hmm. And we implemented a agricultural preservation policy where the Township actually provides money every year toward that preservation of farms and agricultural. Okay, it's a purchase of development rights program.
Okay.
Which is actually run by the state, but the local communities can provide funds toward it to help preserve our local farms.
Okay.
So then I was appointed to the Planning Commission in 2000. I became a certified Michigan planner. Mm-hmm. I'm currently certified, and then I spent 20 years creating a strong master plan with the Planning Commission and putting in place ordinances that help support our rural atmosphere, dark skies environment, with the lighting, and a number of other areas where...
Explain that. That was an interesting project.
Well, it's, I'm trying to remember, that was done by a group that was trying to limit the amount of wasted light that goes up. Because when you take a picture of the United States, you can see how lit up it is.
Right.
And so there's wasted light projecting up instead of down. So there's some guidelines, and there's also certain types of lighting fixtures, and more now than there used to be back then, that
Sure.
do direct downward lighting that are more shaded so they don't glare into the neighbors or down the street and are blinding.
Right.
And we have that in place in Bruce Township. Um, some areas we just need to enforce some of our ordinances better than we are right now.
Right.
So
You have spoken about that before.
yeah, it's kind of a hit and miss or winners and losers, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should be evenly across the board. If it's an ordinance that needs to be reviewed and maybe, changed, we should do that. All right.
Right.
But if it's in place, we should be enforcing it evenly with everyone.
Correct.
So I was on the planning commission, and then in 2010, I was appointed to the township board when one of the board members died. And so that's why I have an odd number. It's 10 instead of 12.
Right.
I did run before that, and I only lost by a couple votes. Back then, I'm running as independent this year, and people have questioned why. And the big reason is when I went to run before 2010, I wanted to run as an independent, but I was advised or given some information that unless you run as a Republican in northern Macomb County, you won't win. All right.
Right. Right.
So I did do that, and I did win re-election in it would have been 2012, and again in 2016. So I was on
In
the
what
board,
position?
trustee.
Trustee.
So I was on the board for 10 years as trustee.
Okay.
During that time, well, actually, before that, I worked with Gary Schucke, who was the supervisor back in the 90s. And we implemented the limestone program to put on our dirt roads. They were extremely bad,
Yeah.
sloppy and messing up everybody's vehicles. So now we have the limestone program. They've applied it to over 30 miles of our rural roads, greatly improving them. In fact, we're doing a second layer now because the first layer impacts down and the second layer gives it more of a base. The other thing I worked on was getting the sidewalk on Van Dyke between Kading and 33 Mile. There was people walking along Van Dyke all the time. The businesses would say they'd see people nearly missed daily. And so it took a few years working with some of the landowners and others to get that in place. But we got that in place, and we did it through a SEMCOG grant. I worked to get the grants from SEMCOG and the Four Corner, I think it's Four Corner Foundation. And they helped pay for the engineering of the project, and then SEMCOG paid for a majority of the project itself. The township did have to pitch in a portion, but it was minuscule.
Right.
The grants that we got equaled about $140,000.
Right.
Then I was working with MDOT on 34 Mile and Van Dyke, which was a terrible intersection, accidents almost weekly.
Absolutely.
And one time I was driving up that way, and a pickup truck just in front of me had been hit broadsided, so that the back of the truck, the bed of the truck on the driver's side was at the center line of the truck. That's how hard it got hit. If it would have been forward a little, just a couple seconds difference,
Right.
we would have had a fatality.
Yeah, my mom and dad lived right off of Van Dyke and 34, and especially as they got older, that light became more and more dangerous. I thought about it every day.
And it's very helpful too, because some of the farmers actually have to cross there
Right.
because they lease fields
With
out.
their
That
big
makes it a lot
equipment. Yeah.
safer and easier for them. The
Yeah.
problem was that the end of the bypass was not done correctly in the
Right.
first
That
place.
big,
And even now, that light helps quite a bit, but that whole intersection needs to be looked at and revamped. And I'd like to open discussions with the county and MDOT to take a look at that.
right. Yeah, they've been trying to fix that for years.
So we finally got the light after about 4 years of that, and then got that put in place. The thing is that people don't realize the trustee has very minuscule involvement in the board, if I can say that, because it's a part-time, you go to the meeting. And in fact, if you get elected as trustee, that's your only requirement.
Right.
It's your other involvement is on your own, how much effort you want to put into it.
Right.
So I tried to do what I could to help the community be a safer, have a safer environment.
Well, you have a unique situation in that you have already been involved in Bruce Township and the local areas. And a lot of people don't even know what the supervisor actually does. So now you're coming back in and, wanting to run as a supervisor position. What does a supervisor do differently than the trustees and the other board members?
Well,
What are they responsible for?
one thing is that technically we're general township, okay? And per that description, your elected people are supposedly part-time. Okay.
Right.
Obviously, you spend a lot more time than that doing the job because of everything has to be required. But that's the technical description. And so the supervisor oversees the general, I'm trying to think of the word, but the daily going on. So the day-to-day, what's going on with the township, the water sewer district, make sure that's, being run properly. Excuse me, setting rates that are fair and equitable. That's one thing I want to make sure, because there's a lot of people concerned about their rates right now. And it should have a vision and goals for the township. And that's what I would like to bring to the role, is that we have to have a vision for our community. Right now, it's kind of, day-to-day, blow with the wind type of thing. And it needs to be kind of put in place where we have a vision of maintaining the rural atmosphere. I'm not against growth at all, but it's got to be controlled. A lot of people don't understand that if you zone something a certain area, like the Van Dyke corridor, to commercial, the developers don't have to go to the planning commission. Now they go right to the building department and they bypass the overseeing of the planning commission overview to see if it's the right fit for the community.
Right.
Is this good is this what the people want? Or, and working with the developers to put in the best development, whatever it might be, for the community.
Right. But don't they have to stick with the master plan? Doesn't that kind of...
They're supposed to fit into that. I mean, that's the thing. We don't always know what's going on behind the scenes and if they're really following that or not. All right. The planning commission should be dedicated to that. And we should make sure that all the planning commission members are trained so they know what their role and understand their role and how they should be supporting. I mean, the master plan is like their Bible, their dictionary of how they should do their job, right? And then the ordinances and the 161 book support that.
Yeah, support that and hold them to that.
Right.
Right.
So the last time we did the master plan, the previous planning commission spent 2 years going through it line by line, page by page, cleaning it up. So we have a very strong master plan, and they're reviewing it, which is correct to do. Every 5 to 10 years, you should be reviewing your master plan. And it doesn't mean you have to change it. Right.
Right.
So the supervisor should be helping give direction on that and have a vision for our community. Well, everybody you talk to wants to maintain a rural atmosphere. It's kind of funny. They say, well, we moved out here because it's country. Well,
now close the door. I'm here.
It's kind of a catch-22 in that sense. But we can maintain the rural atmosphere through the proper policies and, vision for our community. One of the goals that I would like to set is we're doing nothing to protect our assets. So the 33-mile corridor, which is already commercial and manufacturing, it's not protected from a potential threat of being annexed to other communities. All right. Now, I would like to take the township in a direction where we become a charter township. Then we can protect against annexing. And that exact same thing happened in Shelby Township with the city of Utica. If you go down there, you find out like Sam's Club and that whole area, Best Buy, that's city of Utica. Well, it used to be Shelby Township, but they started annexing all that area, and Shelby Township finally had to become a charter township to protect itself. All right,
and to retain their tax base.
Right. And so we need to pursue that to protect what we have now. and not just keep adding, adding, adding. We have to protect what we have. Then we can add, put some wisdom behind it, do
Right.
it wisely where, it's a controlled growth environment.
So is that one of the things that you would do differently than in that in your new position?
I would work with the MTA, which is Michigan Township Association.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they have representation there that we can work with that would help us through that process. I started to look at it back in 2020
Mm-hmm.
when I was running, and I only lost by about 100 votes back then. It was pretty close by our, now we have thousands of people
Yeah.
voting. So,
How many people are voting in Bruce Township
well, I don't know the
typically?
exact numbers, but I've heard that we are such a high number compared to other communities. We're
Mm-hmm.
in the 80 to 85%
Yeah, they always
range,
have a high
right? So
percentage
we have
of
very
who show
active,
up.
knowledgeable people.
Right.
you know. But I would just ask people to do their homework. It's so easy to research now. Go on the internet and do background checks. See where people come from and what they stand for.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
It's so easy to do that nowadays.
Yeah, it is. We have a lot of information out there,
Right.
whether it be false or true, but we have a lot of information out there. And, you know, everybody always, now that we have social media, and, it used to be just a little town and towns had rumors. Now it's social media. A lot of other people are coming into social media that don't necessarily live in Bruce Township or Romeo or the surrounding areas, that are affected by everything
Mhm.
that, our officials do. What what have you accomplished? What has been the best thing, the thing that you're most proud of in the time that you have been involved in the Bruce Township?
Well, the three things I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I spent a lot of time in getting that in place, and they weren't easy to accomplish, but I think those really benefited the community.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be able to do more of that
More.
type of thing, like the limestone, the sidewalk,
Sure.
the light. Like I said, I'd like to work with MDOT and the road commission to revamp that whole
Right.
34-mile intersection.
Right.
It was poorly done to begin with.
Well, and
And
those kind of projects there's always another community involved, whether it be the village of Romeo, or the surrounding areas, Ray, Armada.
Mhm.
How would you bring a better communication to that kind of working arrangement?
Well, we need to collaborate more, I think, with our
Mm-hmm.
surrounding communities. I worked with Addison Township
Right.
when we limestoned DeQuinder.
Mm-hmm.
The whole west side of DeQuinder is Addison Township.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to do a copay on the limestone, it made no sense for us to pay
Right.
for DeQuinder, because all of DeQuinder, because the east side is the Fortest tract. There's no
Right.
homes there. There is up on 36 Mile and that. So I worked with Addison Township, and we split the cost over
Mm-hmm.
3 years to do DeQuinder.
Right.
Um, I've been talking with some of the people that are running in the village of Romeo,
Mm-hmm.
and they suggested that we collaborate more on common ordinances, and that
Right.
makes sense. I mean,
Right.
we could work together to see where it makes sense.
But when it comes down to money, since we broadcast all of the meetings, so I watch them all. So I continuously watch how Romeo and Bruce, you know, have some conflicts, and the community has a sense of that they don't communicate enough and they don't communicate well, whether it be Romeo or whether it be Bruce. No one really knows. But how do you see yourself coming into that situation when it comes to money? Not just, ordinance changes and rewriting, of laws and regulations, but actually when you have to share in like the sewer taps and all of that. That has always been a bone of contention.
Yeah, and that's something it would need to address with whoever's elected on the village
Mm-hmm.
board, because some of the people on the north side of Gate Street are on the Romeo Waters sewer system.
Right, right.
Yet they're in Bruce Township, so they think they should be, paying those rates and that. So
Yeah.
that's something that we need to have some dialogue on. What's the best way of doing that? How we can do cost sharing,
Mm-hmm.
right? My background is that I have a business degree and a marketing degree with a master's degree.
Right.
And I've worked with GM for 40 years and I've negotiated with businesses and unions. I have that background, multi-million dollar budgets. So I'm very familiar with that. And when I was I'm a certified project manager, still am, but when I was actually in the active role, all my projects came in on time and under budget.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to see how we can address, first of all, the Bruce Township debt, which is
Right.
way out of control and not funded properly. And
So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because that is a huge concern, with even the surrounding areas, because everyone is affected. Kids all go to the same school. We
right,
all hang out, in the village, and you see every year that's discussed.
yeah.
What can be done to actually make a difference? If you can make a difference at all.
Well, it's a millstone around the neck of
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Township. 4 years ago, the debt was about 4 million. Now it's at 6 million,
Mm-hmm.
and the funding's been at 9% the whole time. And the state actually, their guidelines are 40%, so we're
Mm-hmm.
way underfunded. There has to be ways to look at that debt, consolidate it, eliminate some low-hanging fruit that should be reduced or eliminated, and then consolidate it in a way where we can get it under control. At least get it funded properly,
Mm-hmm.
and
But
that's
everybody always talks about funding, but then they say, well, it's out of our hands.
it's not any of that. It's just like we don't run our communities like a business, and we should. We should have balanced budgets for one thing, and you can't do something unless you find the funding for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing with becoming a charter township. We're very limited on grants we can apply for as a general township. You become a charter township now, you opens up the doors for all kinds of grants.
But that would take a vote of the people, right?
I believe so, at
And,
least, but we can work in that direction. Yeah, and then we would have to do that. But we would have to explain the benefits of doing that, right?
mm-hmm.
The
And you'd have to sell it to the
Yeah,
people.
and
And
too big.
you've seen Romeo try to go to city for the same benefits.
Yeah,
And it's very difficult to talk to people that without being able to squelch their fears.
right. We need to show people the benefits of that
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that they're getting good information and not people out there, just trying to knock it down.
Right.
For instance, in 2020, when I ran, there was a rumor spreading that I wanted to cut the benefits of the fire and emergency
Oh yeah, you
services.
talked about that last
Right.
time. Yeah.
And that is absolutely false.
Small town rumors.
I've never made that statement at all. In
Yeah.
fact, I was on the fire brigade at General Motors for 30 years as an incipient stage firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a nephew who's an EMT firefighter in Harrison Township. He was a Navy medic. Two of my brothers and my dad are all veterans.
Yeah.
So that's an absolute false statement that was spread around. I
There
highly
always is.
highly respect those people and what they have to do. And yeah, I've encountered some of the stuff that they deal with, and I think most people wouldn't be able to handle some of it.
Right. Well, that
Um,
rumor's not going around this time around, right?
I hope not.
Do you have any other ones that
And
you want to address?
well, there's people that are out there especially on Facebook, trying to make me guilty by association of the previous board.
Okay.
Okay, and some of that
That's
is
the big thing.
yeah, and a big
Guilt
one.
by association.
Well, yeah, and one of them was the RAS development and the rezoning of the 33-mile McKay corner.
Mhm.
That actually was approved prior to me being on the board in 2010 by the previous board. And here's what happened. The Planning Commission looked at that.
Mm-hmm.
And by a vote of 7-0, the Planning Commission sent a recommendation to the board to deny it.
Right.
Okay. The board, for the first time and only
That was
time,
back in Richard Corey.
that was no at all. That was back with Shooky.
Oh, with Shooky.
And,
Okay.
yeah. The only board member to vote against it, I think, was Carol Regis. But anyways, it passed. And, that was the only time in my 20 years in the Planning Commission was ever overruled.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I do remember that.
So, right.
Yeah.
So that was, people are trying to say, well, he was there when the RAS was rezoned. Well, I was on the Planning Commission. We all voted no. But the board at the time, which I was not on,
Mm-hmm.
voted to overrule us.
Right.
And what they do is they try to say, well, look at this development went in, that development went in. But you got to look at the circumstances of development.
Mm-hmm.
We had, and we're promoting a lot of open space development back then.
Right.
So, yes, some of the developments have smaller lots and they're condensed, but they got no more houses than they would have in a normal development because 50% of that land is forever preserved as open space.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In order to do that, they put in a smaller infrastructure, a little smaller lots.
Right.
But they have a wonderful area to enjoy.
Right.
Okay. And then you have to look at the votes. Just because you were on the board of the planning commission at the time, how did I vote? I voted no most of the times on big developments, that just didn't make sense for our community.
Right.
And so you can't just group us in and say, well, he was on the board back then, or she did this or that. And it's got to look at the details behind it,
Right.
and not just the highlights that somebody throws out there to try to make you look,
Sure.
Yeah,
Everybody, when they decide to take the time out of their personal lives and away from their families to run for these positions, especially right before an election, the rumors heat up. So what would you tell your voters that are going to the polls in November? Exactly who you are, what you're going to bring to the table, what you're going to do differently if you're elected in November.
Well, who I am, I'm a man of my word. I speak clearly and concisely. I don't mince words. I'm not grandstanding. I'm not doing it for myself. I don't need this position for my retirement. I don't need it. I'm okay. I'm doing good, but I want to do it for my community to help the people that are maybe burdened with extra costs. All right. Have a vision for the community, which right now we seem to be lacking any vision. Set goals for us to reach. That's what I've been explaining with the
Right.
with the charter, and have a vision of maintaining a rural atmosphere through controlled growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying at all no growth. Everybody I think out there knows they're going to have some kind of growth, but it has to be done wisely and controlled. And when the Planning Commission reviewed the master plan last time, we left the Van Dyke corridor as it was because when the developer or landowner would like to develop it, they can come to the Planning Commission and request rezoning or come to it with a plan to say, hey, do you think this will fit with the community? And before they even go to the Planning Commission with that request, they can sit down with the supervisor, they should be, and saying, hey, is this a good fit for the community? What do you think based off the master plan and, community input? And that's one thing I would listen to all sides. And then I would work with the board members to make the best possible decision for our community, not for an entity or individual. It's for the community. And that's the reason that I'm running, basically, is because I want to see us move forward as a rural environment with controlled growth, wise growth. And here's a prime example. If you go to Frankenmuth and you drive in from the south end, they have farmland right up to the edge of the town, right?
Right.
Or the
Oh, yeah.
city of
Right up
Frankenmuth,
to the city.
right?
Right.
So, and I've talked to the clerk in that community, and they said it's all done through their ordinances and master plan, and that has to stick to it. We just can't go blow with the breeze and change our minds every other week or month.
Right.
We have to stand firm in what we believe as a community, and that's basically what I'm looking to achieve.
Good. That's a good message. Well, we hope that everybody comes out to the polls at the same rate as Bruce Township, in our in Romeo and Washington and the surrounding areas. So we thank you for joining us today, Paul, and we'll see you on the ballot, November 5th.
I appreciate all the support I've been getting, and I just want to relate to people that I would be in that position for the people and the betterment of Bruce Township.
Right.
And that's what I would project and move forward with, a vision and goals set for our
Great.
community.
Good message. Good message.
Right.
That's what everybody wants to hear from a politician.
I'm not a politician.
You're not?
I'm a project manager.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul.